there, thanks for joining me to color. Today we're going to be coloring this adorable new Mo's digital pencil image called the Love Cupcake. Isn't she super cute? I'll put a link to her down in the description box in case you would like to head over and grab her and color along with me. I'll also just put in a pop-up of the colors I'm going to use. You can also pick these colors up over on the store blog. I always put a pin card at the bottom of my post in case you would like to color or save the card for later on your pin board, or if you'd like to print it out and put it in a notebook, that would be perfectly fine too. But I think it's easier to have a pin card that you can keep track of all the colors you love. That way you don't have a bunch of post-it notes hanging out all over the place. So I printed my image on some Neenah 80-pound solar white cardstock, so let's color. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start with our skin. For that we're going to use 11, 21, 00, 000. For cheeks I'm going to use R20 and R30. We're not doing anything fancy, we're just going to color it up and go from there. I always like to color dark to light. A lot of people like to do it the other way. This is just what works for me, so if it doesn't work for you, feel free to do it the opposite direction. So we're going to go ahead and start with our E11 first, and I'm just going to color in that little bit of skin that's down there above her shoe. I decided she wasn't going to wear socks, so I went ahead and just colored it all the way in because it's pretty small, at least it is for me since I printed out my image, so it's small enough to fit on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card front. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a little stripe of our E11 on the back side of her hand just to give it a little bit of a shadow there. And then we're going to do the same thing on her other arm. We're going to go ahead and give it a little bit of color on the back side because I'm going to have the light source coming from over there on my right hand side. So a little bit above her sleeve, and then we're going to go right up the side of her arm, nothing fancy. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab E21 next. We're going to color in that far back hand all the way because it's pretty small and there wasn't enough space for any more color, so I'm just going to color it in. Then I'm going to go ahead and add that on top of my other hand there too. We're just going to put a little swipe of our E21 in there to fill in a little bit more space. But on this one, since it's a little bit bigger, I left a little bit of a white space there so we could take our E00 and we could color that in. Quick and easy, nothing too fancy. I tend to use my third color there to go over the entire thing, and that helps me blend all the colors together. Then I'm going to hop up here and we're going to do her face. So again, I'm going to start with my E11, which is the darkest. And I'm going to go with a little bit there in the crease where her neck and her chin meet. Give it a little dab of color. And then I'm going to start up there at her part, and I'm going to swipe this color right along the edge of her face. We're going to go all the way back around, down to the other side to where her neck is, and down to her sleeve. And then we're going to do the little curly Q inside of her ear. Then we're going to go over that with our E21. Just going to go ahead and grab that. We're going to fill in the rest of her neck down there at the bottom too. So I'm going to do the bottom half of her ear with the E21 because I feel that it would be the darkest since it's further away from my light source. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill in her neck because it's behind the cupcake and under her chin, so it's going to be pretty dark. So up here I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to touch my pen down on top of the E11, and then I'm just going to swipe away from that. And for me, when I swipe away, I tend to pick my hand up, so the end of my swipe seems to be a little bit lighter than the front of my swipe. And if you start on top of your previous color, it kind of starts dark right there so that it keeps it pretty cohesive. Next, we'll go ahead and fill in her ear with our E00. And then again, I'll touch down on my E21, and I'm going to swipe away from that. So again, it'll get lighter as I go more towards the right. And I'm going to be careful going around her eye because I don't want to color that little white spot in. I want it to be, her eye to be white in the inside. And I'm going over the top of her cupcake there onto her cheek because I think that's going to be pretty dark too. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our E00, or nope, 000, and we're going to go ahead and swipe from our E00 over to the edge there. You don't have to go all the way across if you don't want to, because we're going to add a second coat here in just a bit, and that will leave a little bit of a white space there on the side. Next, we're going to add some cheek color. So we're going to go ahead and do R20 first. And I tend to start my cheeks in the middle so that it's darkest where I put the pin down and then swipe out from the middle section. And there's not much there above her cupcake, so I'm just putting a little dab above the top of that cupcake between the cupcake and the eye, or the frosting. And then over here, I'll start sort of at the pupil, and again, put my pin down where I want it to be darkest, and then I swipe away on both directions so that it'll be lighter on the outside and darker in the middle. Then I'm going to soften those edges with R30. So I always put my R30 down on top of my R20, and I'm just going to give it a quick little flick. Not too much. I don't want her cheeks to be huge, so I'm just adding a little bit of that on the edges just to soften it up a little bit. And you could always go over it a couple of times if you want it to be darker. I just prefer it 1 or 2 times. And then this time we're going to skip the first 2 colors and we're going to start with E00. I'm going to go over her chin or her ear and her neck. And then I'm going to start on the edge and I'm going to swipe over both of those darkest colors and I'm going to come out just a little bit past where I put my E00 the first time. Again, be careful going around her eye. You don't want to color the inside of her eye in. We want that to stay white. And I'm just swiping clear across her face that it will be a little bit darker, and it helps to smooth out all those colors there. And then I'll come back with my E000 and same thing. I'll just start on one side and I'll swing it all the way across and to the other side. I'm covering her entire face. And at this point, this is where I decide whether or not I need to add some more cheek color, but I'm kind of liking how pink they are, so I'm just going to leave them just like that. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do her hair. For that we'll use E57, E55, and E53. And she's got some straight parts and then she's got some curly parts there on the edge. So we're going to go ahead and start with our E57, and we're also going to use these colors on the bear. So let's go ahead and start down there. So I'm going to add a little swipe of my E57 along the bottom of each of his paws. And then for his head, I'm going to go around the left ear and I'm going to go down over the top of my heart, and then he's got a little bit of his snout showing there on the right hand side. I'm going to go around that because we're going to use our lightest color on that. You want to be careful not to color that in. And then I'm going to color in a little bit on that side of his face. And since it's going to be further away over there, I went ahead and added a little bit extra on that left hand side of my bear. Now we're going to go ahead and add some to our hair. So I'm adding a couple little flicks down here closest to her face so that it gives it a little bit of color. And then I'm going to go into where she's got some curls and I'm going to add a couple of little swirls in there. I'm not really following the hairline. I'm just kind of doing some little squiggles in the direction her hair is going, just to give it a little bit of color mixed into those little curls up there. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a little bit of color coming away from our little heart there. Since the heart is leaning over her hair, it's going to add a little bit of shadow in there. So we're going to flick a couple little flicks away from that to darken up that edge. And then we're going to come from the part, because usually the parts are a little bit darker. So I'm going to give that a little bit of color, a little bit color on this side of the part. And then we're going to come away from her little ponytails and bring that up. And since her head is kind of leaning down a little bit further, I'm probably going to come back in and make these lines just a little bit further up there on the top, because we want it to cover a little bit more space because it'll be a little bit darker up there. Then we're going to go ahead and do some little swirls for inside of her curls. Again, I'm not really following the lines. I'm just kind of going a little squiggles in there just to add a little bit of color in the inside of her curls there. You can go over the little lines that are drawn, but I found that was a little too difficult for me. Now we're going to go ahead and add E55. So for our bear, we're going to go ahead and fill in his paws, and then we're going to also fill in his head and his ear. I left the snout and the little dots on the inside of his ears for the lightest color, so I'm not going to color those. I'm going to try to be careful going around the edges and not get any color in there. I'm giving him a couple of coats there because he was looking kind of sad. My line wasn't blending as much as I wanted, so I just gave him a couple of extra swipes of that color. Then we'll go up here and we'll add some more swirls to our hair, and I'm trying to do in a different area than when I put down the darkest color. You want to kind of fill in a little bit more space. I'm going to go ahead and fill in this little section here underneath of that heart, and then we're going to add a few little streaks across the top of her head. I'm leaving a little bit of white in there so I can fill it in with my E53. Same down here, we're going to swipe a little bit of color in. And I'm trying to keep my pen more straight up and down so that for me, it makes my streaks skinnier. And the faster you go, the skinnier they will go. Because the sooner you set your pen down on the paper, it starts sucking up ink. So I try to be pretty quick with the streaks in my hair so that they don't become too fat. And again, in the hair, we'll add some little swirls in there. And I'm trying to put them in a different area than when I put the E57. Now we're going to go in with our E53, and we're going to color in the little bear's snout and the little dots for his ears. And I'm swiping over his paws there because I didn't like how blended it was still, so I'm just giving it an extra swipe just to fill it the rest of the way in and smooth it out. Then we'll add some to our curls. Swipe over the top of her head, and you could also leave some white in there, but I just can never get that to look the way I want it, so I tend to just cover it the rest of the way up. And swirl some around in here in your little curls. I really love her hair, it's super duper cute. And if it gets too blended, I always go back with my darkest color and add a little bit more back in, so I'm not worried that it all kind of gets squished together, because I'm going to come back with my E57 and I'm just going to add a little bit of that dark back in there. So here I decided I needed to take up a little bit more space, so see, I'm going to swipe that over the top and bring in a little bit more of that dark so it looks a little bit darker on this side. And we'll bring this all the way down to her ear, a little bit from the top, and a few lines across the top of that. I thought it would look a little bit more realistic than rather having a big white space there at the top. You've got a little bit of that color shading that area in. And then my curls were a little too blended, so I'm just going to go right back over the top of some of those little swirls with some color. All right, so let's go ahead and do her sweater and her pants. For that, we're going to use T1, BG11, and BG10. I picked the T1 because I wanted the paper to be a little bit grayer, or my coloring to be grayer, to match the paper that I picked for the card. And if you're interested in putting the card, we're going to make a card at the end, so make sure to stay tuned for that. So I went ahead and I used my T1, and I'm just going to color over both of her pants and her sweater. I'm going to fill the whole thing in, and then we're not going to use it anymore. I just wanted it to have that grayish base coat so that it would suck up some of that color when I put the blue-green on the top of it. So again, we're just going to fill in the sweater up here at the top. Just go ahead and fill it all the way in. And I usually pick my colors to go with my paper, so I picked my paper first. If I didn't pick my paper first, I would pick some outrageous color that didn't match anything. So for me, it's easier to pick my paper and then decide what colors I want to color my image. Next, we're going to go ahead and go with our BG11. You're going to want to add this where you want to have all your shadows. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit underneath of her shirt. So we're going to swipe right across the bottom of her pants there. And then we're going to go down the inside of her leg. And she's got a little knee there, so I made sure to bump it out just a little bit extra right there. And then for the other leg, we'll go down the back of her leg. Same thing for the knee. I gave it a little bit extra right underneath that little line that's already there for us. And then for a sweater, this side was pretty small, but I tried to leave just a little bit of space for my lightest color there at the top of that little fold of the sweater. And then I colored in her sleeve. And then up here, her collar is going to be lighter at the top, so I went ahead and left a little space of white at the top. And then we're going to go down the back of her sweater, the bottom of her sleeve. And I did a little bit in each of those little lines that for her elbows, because there's going to be a shadow there. And then we're going to go underneath of her arm. And we're going to do the back of the sweater underneath a pocket, and I'm going to do about half of the pocket there just to give that some shadows too. And then we're going to take BG10 and we're going to fill it the rest of the way in. Now I decided it wasn't dark enough, so I'm going to go ahead and come back with my BG11. I'm going to add a second coat. So I'm just going over the exact same area I did the first time and darkening that up. And then I'll come back over that with my BG10 to fill in the rest of my sweater and my pants. So next we're going to go ahead and we're going to do her shirt and the frosting on our little cupcake. For that we're going to use R22, 21, R30, and then for the collar of her shirt we're going to use W1 to add a little bit of shadows in there. So we're going to start out with our R22 and we're going to do her shirt. So add a little bit right along the edge of our sweater. I'm going to give this a couple of coats, so don't worry if it doesn't blend like you like. We'll add a little bit here along underneath of her sleeve, all the way down to the bottom, and then where it goes underneath of her sweater, I'm going to cover that whole entire area in. And you can also go, if you're worried about touching the sweater, you can make a little line right along the edge of your sweater and then pull the color off of that. I'm trying to be super careful because I don't want to get that red on that green. And we'll even that up. And just got a little spot there that's underneath of her shirt. You want to fill that in too. Then we're going to go up here and we're going to add a little bit of shadows onto our cupcake. So go right next to the cherry. And then I kind of picked a spot where I thought the frosting was dipping. So I'm going to go ahead and go around here. And I'm going to bring it all the way across to the other side. So we're going to say that's the bottom of our frosting layer. And then we're going to do the same thing over on the bottom frosting layer. We're going to add a little bit along the edge, and we're going to bring that right around to the other side. And I didn't go all the way up there because remember we're going to have our light source come from the right-hand side, so I thought that it would be a little bit lighter over there. Next, we're going to add R21. So I touch down on top of my R22, and then I flick away from that color and bring it out onto the other half of her shirt. And remember, we're going to give it 2 coats, so don't worry if it looks terrible now because we're going to add a little bit on there. And I got a little crazy there and I added some to her pants, so I went out of the line, so I'll try to fix that later. Our 30 is pretty, oh, I forgot to do the frosting, so let's go up there and do our frosting real quick. And I'm just adding a little bit more of our color on there. Filling in a little bit more space. Now we'll come in with our R30 and we will finish filling in our frosting. All the dogs have decided they should come in and help me do the voiceover, so they're going to wander in and out. If you hear any click-clicking, that's what they're doing. And we got a new puppy, Mr. Hercules, and he is excited about chewing everything up. So, you know, he's constantly running in and out and biting my foot. So I'm going over the edge there. I didn't go all the way to the edge of her shirt because I'm going to come back with my second color, and if I leave that white, when I come back for my second coat, it will be the lightest right there on the edge. So now I'll go ahead and do R22. I'm just going to fill in my cupcake where I did it the first time. Then when I do her shirt, I'm going to bring it out just a little bit further than I did the first time so that it'll go over that edge and soften it a little bit more. And don't forget to do the underside of your shirt. Give that a little bit of a swipe of color too. Then you'll add your second coat of R21. And I'm bringing that up a little bit further than I did the first time to use a little bit more space up. We'll fill in the rest of our shirt. I'm going to go all the way across. And I tend to, when I do the last color, I bring it clear across the entire shirt. So I start way at the other side and I swipe over the entire area. And same with the R30, we're going to fill that in. So I'm just going to swipe over the entire cupcake, or the frosting. Kind of blends that all together. And I'm trying to be careful here. I don't want to go onto my sweater, so I'm kind of keeping it close to that side. Now I'm going to swipe over her entire shirt out to the outside. All right, so let's go ahead and grab our R22. I'm going to fill in that little bottom of her shirt because I want it to be a little bit darker. You could also take and go ahead and go over it with your, if you have R24 available, that would make it even darker, so that would be perfect underneath there. Now we'll take our W1 and we're just going to give it a little swipe here on the left-hand side of that collar just to give it a little bit of a shadow in there. I didn't fill it all the way in because I wanted it to appear that it's white, but I just gave it a couple of little swipes. All right, let's go ahead and do our shoes next. For that, we'll use W8, W6, and W1 for the soles and the little white tip of her shoe. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my W8. And for that, I went ahead and I filled in that whole front section where the tongue is at. So I tried not to get any on the laces because it's pretty dark and I wanted to leave those white. So I'm just giving a little dab in between each one of those little laces. And then I'm going to go down the back side of her shoe. And there is a lace right there, so I tried to avoid that so that we could have it remain white. You could also go back over it with your Sharpie white paint pen if you get some on there. And again, on this side, we're going to fill in between the laces, so I'm very carefully just kind of dabbing my pin in there, filling in some space. And then I'm going to go down the sides, each side of her shoe, just to give it a little bit of shadow on each side. And they're pretty small, so I'm trying to be pretty careful, and I'm holding my pen more straight up and down than towards the side. Then I'm going to fill in that white space on her shoes with my W6. And again, I'm being careful of those laces. I don't want to color those. I'm trying to leave those white. So we're just going to swipe over that. And I tend to swipe over the line from the W8 just a little bit extra, just to soften it just a little bit more. Then we'll fill in this side. Again, be careful of your laces. We're just going to fill the rest of that side in. And see how there's a little line on there? So I'm just going back over that line with a second little swipe. And there's a little bit of a shoe on that side that needed to be covered up. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my W1 and I'm going to give each of the soles and that little patch on the top of her shoe just a little swipe of color just to give it a little bit of shadow. And this side I filled in a little bit more. I kind of brought it around to where the black stops. All right, let's go ahead and do the cupcake wrapper. For that, we're going to use Y23 and Y32. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to color in the entire cupcake wrapper first with my Y23. This is actually the lightest or the darkest color. Or sorry, we're going to start with Y32, which is the lightest color. I knew I had that backwards. So to make it easy, I went ahead and I just filled the entire thing in. Just swipe over it. Ta-da! We're all done with that part. And then I'm going to come back with my Y23 and I'm going to pick every other wrinkle and I'm going to make it darker. You can also just go down a couple of the little lines and give it some shadows in there, but I thought it would be easier to just fill in every other little section and give it a little bit more, make it look a little darker in there. I'm going to go over it a couple of times just to darken it up. You could also use, if you want to skip this whole Y23, you could do Y38, and that would make it a lot darker in there. And then I'm just going to fill in the letters up here on my little balloons. I'm not even going to shade those. I'm just going to fill them all the way in. All right, then that leaves us with the red. So for that, we're going to use R29, R24, and then R22. I always leave the red to last because me and red are not friends, so it's easier for me to leave it to the very last thing so I don't make a big mess. So I'm going to use my R29 first, and we want to put that wherever we want to have some shadows. So we're going to do the little heart down there the bear's holding, the little cherry on the frosting, and then we're going to do all the balloons. So we're going to go a little bit around that stem up there and then a little bit on this bottom half of our cherry. Then we're going to come in with our R24 next. I'm going to swipe over my entire R29 and I'm going to add a little bit more color to my heart, a little dab more to my cherry, and then we'll fill it in with our R22. And I tend to, when I get to this color, I kind of swipe it over the entire area. Kind of swirl it around in there a little bit, make little circles or whatever so that it kind of swooshes it all together, I guess. Blends it a little bit better. Then we'll go up here and we'll hop up there and we'll do our little heart. So again, you're going to start with your R29. And I'm going to do The left side of this one. So we're going to go up here and we're going to go right along that edge. I'm trying not to get any on that yellow because if you get some on there, you are not going to get that off. So try to be careful. And then we'll come in with our 24. And I didn't want to leave it, you could do them all to the end, but because it's so hot in here with the lights, I tend to try to be a little bit faster because it dries pretty fast and it doesn't blend very well. So I'm going to do each one individually, but you, if you're doing it at home, you could go ahead and do all of the reds on the balloons at one time and then come with the next color because you're going to be a little bit faster than I'm going, and it's not going to be as hot, hopefully, in where you're at compared to how hot it is in here. But I'm just going to fill in each little balloon. I'm having a little trouble blending there, so I decided I'd go over it another time with my R22. I'm thinking I need to clean the nib on my R22 and probably refill it because it was not doing what I wanted it to do. And I definitely need to clean that R29. Look at the end of that thing. That's looking very crusty. That one is constantly looking bad. I don't know about what yours looks like, but mine is constantly needing cleaning. So we're going to go down this side, and I decided I'd wing it. I'm like, I know it's hot in here, but I'm going to try to see if we can do it all at once. So this is how I usually do it when I'm coloring by myself in my room. It's not as hot as underneath all these video lights when I'm in there, so it's not quite so bad. Then we'll come in with our R24. And again, be careful going around all that yellow because if you get it on there, it's not going to come off. You could also do, if you do get some on there, you could color the letters black. I think that would look really cool. And then you don't have to worry if you get some color on there because they're black. You just color right over the top of it. And then we're going to go in with our R22 and fill those the rest of the way in. All right, so I'm not really loving how that looks, so I'm going to go in with a second coat. So we're going to start with our R24. I went ahead and skipped the R29 because it was pretty dark. I'm just trying to get it to blend a little bit better because it's looking pretty streaky. So I'm just going over the edge of my R24 from last time and giving it a little bit extra color and soaking my paper a little bit so that it'll move it around when I come back with my R22. We'll grab that. Swipe it right over that edge. I'm kind of swirling I tend to kind of give it a couple of extra swipes back and forth. That kind of helps move it around a little bit and soften the edges a little bit more. Well, we better give her something to stand on, so I'm going to take W1 and I'm going to give it a couple of quick swipes along the bottom of her shoes so that she will have an area that looks like she's casting a shadow. So I kind of went up there just below where those little shoestrings are hanging out and gave it, and I keep it kind of straight across the other side, so I'm using my pen to kind of a visible line to go to the other side. Same with this side, we'll go underneath that little shoestring that's hanging out and just swipe away from there. Then to darken it up, I'm going to go back with a second coat. So in between her shoes, I thought it would be a little bit darker, so I'm going to darken it up in there. And this side, I thought it would be a little bit darker since we're having our light source coming from the right-hand side. The left-hand side would be darker over there. Nothing fancy, we're just swiping it along, and then I'm just going to leave it like that. All right, so we have our Love Cupcake all colored up, so let's go ahead and put a card together. I think I'll go back too, and I'm going to add some sparkles to these letters up here and maybe some sparkles in her hair. But I've cut out some parts, but see what I mean about the paper's kind of got like a grayish tint. So I thought the sweater would make it, by adding the T1 to that, it gave it a little bit of a gray tint to go with that. So let's go ahead and put our card together. And we're trying to keep this pretty simple, so I don't have a bunch of layers. We're going to go ahead and use just this little bit. So next is going to be this cute one with the little arrows. Isn't that cute? Or if you wanted, you could always flip your paper over and see what's on the back. This one I'm going to kind of offset it a little bit, so I'm going to put it over this way to the left more. Next, I'm going to use this little piece that says love. Even though most of it is going to be covered up, it doesn't really matter, but I like the color of the paper. And this, we're going to go up a little bit, but it's going to be even with the green piece, so I'm going to kind of make sure it's straight over here. Then we'll attach our girl. And since I offset the black piece, I'm going to go ahead and set this one over this way more. And then I cheated this time and I ran my sentiment through the sticker maker because it's pretty small, and this sentiment actually said I love you, and I'm only using the the you part because I figured with up here at the top it says love, so that down here it could say you. See if we can get this sticker paper off. Wasn't so bad. Okay, now the tricky part is trying to get it on there even. Okay, let's hold the card a little bit straighter here. Let's go with right here. But by putting the sticker stuff on the back, I didn't have to mess with it. I just could stick it on there. And I did the same thing for these little hearts. I went ahead and just ran them through the sticker maker. And these are some Lawn Fawn hearts. It comes with like 2 or 3 of them in a little die set. There we go. And there is our little Love Cupcake all colored up and put together. Isn't she cute? If you have a question, leave me a comment down below and I'll make sure to get back to you. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll put a link to the image down in the description box in case you would like to head over and pick her up from Mo's Digital Pencil and color along with me. I hope you're having a fabulous day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.